Billionaire called black employee useless until she discovered an error that prevented the company's bankruptcy. The words hit Grace Williams like a physical blow. You're useless. Absolutely useless. Marcus Thornhill's voice echoed through the executive conference room of Thornhill Industries, his face twisted with contempt as he towered over her desk in the accounting department. 63 employees watched in frozen silence as the billionaire CEO publicly destroyed the woman who had worked in his company for 17 years. Grace stood motionless, her dark hands clutching a manila folder against her chest. At 58 years old, she had weathered many storms, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, and her simple navy dress spoke of dignity, not defiance. "Sir, I was just trying to what?" Marcus cut her off, his pale face flushed with anger. "Trying to waste my time with your incompetence? Trying to pretend you understand corporate finance when you barely graduated from some community college?" The silence in the room grew heavier. Grace felt every eye on her, some filled with pity, others with the cruel satisfaction that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation. She had seen that look before, too many times in her life. "Mr. Thornhill," she tried again, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, "there's an irregularity in the quarterly reports that I believe requires your immediate attention." "An irregularity?" Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that made several employees flinch. "The only irregularity here is that someone like you still has a job in my accounting department. Do you know how many Ivy League graduates would kill for your position?" Grace swallowed hard. She had started at Thornhill Industries as a night janitor, cleaning the very floors these executives walked on. Through correspondence courses, night classes, and sheer determination, she had earned her accounting certification. It had taken her 12 years to move from the cleaning staff to the accounting department, and every step had been a battle. "Sir, please just look at these numbers." Marcus snatched the folder from her hands and threw it across the room. Papers scattered like wounded birds, financial reports and calculations covering the polished marble floor. "I don't need to look at anything from you," he spat. "Do you know what my father would say if he saw what this company has become? Hiring people who don't belong here, pretending that charity is the same as competence?" Grace felt the hot sting of tears behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. She had cried enough tears in her life, and she had learned long ago that tears change nothing. "I just want to help the company, sir," she said quietly, her dignity intact despite the assault on it. "Help?" Marcus's laugh was cruel. "You want to help? Then clean out your desk. You're fired." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Fired. After 17 years of loyalty, of arriving early and staying late, of missing her daughter's school plays and her grandson's birthday parties to meet deadlines. "Mr. Thornhill," a voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was David Chen, the CFO, a man who had always treated Grace with respect. "Perhaps we should review Ms. Williams's concerns before making any." "Are you questioning my decision, David?" Marcus turned his fury on the CFO. "Because I can clean out 2 desks just as easily as one." David Chen's mouth closed and shame colored his face as he looked away from Grace. No one else spoke. No one dared. Grace looked at Marcus Thornhill, really looked at him. She saw a man in his early 40s, handsome in the way that wealth and privilege make men handsome. His tailored Italian suit probably cost more than 3 months of her salary. His watch was a Patek Philippe, a brand she had only seen in magazines. Everything about him screamed power, success, superiority. But Grace also saw something else. She saw a man who had inherited his father's empire without inheriting his wisdom. She saw fear hidden beneath arrogance, insecurity masked by cruelty. She saw a man who needed to humiliate others to feel strong. "I'll clear my desk, Mr. Thornhill," Grace said softly, her voice carrying a strange calm that made several people look at her with surprise. "But I want you to know something." Marcus raised an eyebrow, amused by her audacity. "And what's that?" "I forgive you." The word seemed to confuse him more than anger him. "You forgive me?" "Yes, sir." I forgive you for your anger, for your words, for your judgment. I've learned in my 58 years that holding on to bitterness only poisons the one who carries it. Grace bent down and began gathering the scattered papers from the floor, her movements slow and deliberate. I'll pray for you, Mr. Thornhill. I'll pray that you find peace and that you learn to see people for who they truly are, not just for what you think they represent. Marcus stared at her, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how these scenes were supposed to play out. The humiliated employee was supposed to crumble, to rage, to give him justification for his cruelty. But Grace Williams simply gathered her papers, straightened her back, and walked toward her desk with her head held high. As she packed her few personal items into a cardboard box, a photo of her daughter and grandson, a small plant that had survived countless office relocations, a coffee mug that read, "Faith over Fear," Grace thought about the folder she had tried to show Marcus. The irregularities she had discovered weren't small. They were catastrophic. 3 months of careful analysis had revealed a pattern of discrepancies in the company's international accounts. Someone was manipulating the numbers, hiding losses, creating phantom profits. The quarterly report that Marcus was about to present to the board and shareholders was built on lies. Thornhill Industries was heading toward a financial cliff, and no one knew it except Grace. She had spent weeks verifying her findings, checking and rechecking every calculation, afraid that her own inexperience might be leading her to false conclusions. But the numbers didn't lie. Someone was systematically draining the company of millions of dollars, covering their tracks with sophisticated accounting tricks that had fooled everyone. Everyone except the useless employee from the community college. Grace closed the cardboard box and took one last look at the office where she had spent so many years. She thought about walking back into that conference room, about demanding that Marcus listen to her. But she knew it would be futile. Men like Marcus Thornhill didn't listen to women like Grace Williams, so she made a different choice. As Grace Williams walked out of Thornhill Industries for what she believed was the last time, she carried more than just a cardboard box of personal items. She carried 17 years of overlooked contributions, unacknowledged expertise, and a truth that could save or destroy the empire of the man who had just called her useless. The security guard at the front desk, Miguel, who had worked there almost as long as Grace, stood up as she approached. His eyes were sad. "Ms. Grace, I heard what happened. I'm sorry." Grace smiled at him, a genuine smile that somehow made the moment even more heartbreaking. "Don't be sorry, Miguel. God has a plan, even when we can't see it. What will you do now?" Grace looked out at the gray November sky, at the city that had been her home for 30 years, at the streets where she had walked from her small apartment to this building countless times. "I'll do what I've always done," she said quietly. "I'll have faith, and I'll do what's right." As she walked through the revolving doors and into the cold afternoon air, Grace didn't know that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would expose the rot at the heart of Thornhill Industries, bring a billionaire to his knees, and prove that sometimes the people we dismiss as useless are the very ones who hold the power to save us. The story of Grace Williams and Marcus Thornhill was just beginning, and neither of them knew how drastically their lives were about to change. The small apartment in the Bronx had never felt so quiet. Grace sat at her kitchen table, the cardboard box from Thornhill Industries still unopened beside her. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television, the familiar sounds of a game show filtering through. Outside, the November rain had started, drumming against the window in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She should have been crying. She should have been angry. But instead, Grace felt an odd sense of peace, as if a weight she hadn't known she was carrying had finally been lifted. Her cell phone buzzed. It was her daughter, Michelle. "Mama, I just heard. David Chen's wife called me. Mama, are you okay?" Grace smiled, even though her daughter couldn't see it. "I'm fine, baby. I'm always fine." "Fine? Mama, that man humiliated you in front of everyone. He fired you. You should sue him. You should—" "Michelle, sweetheart, breathe." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. Anger won't change what happened. And a lawsuit? Baby, men like Marcus Thornhill have lawyers who cost more per hour than I made in a month. No, that's not the path for me. Then what is? Mama, you're 58 years old. Finding another job won't be easy, and you know it. Grace did know it. She had been rejected from countless positions over the years before Thornhill Industries gave her a chance. Age discrimination, racial discrimination. She had faced them all. The thought of starting over again made her tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. I have faith, Michelle. God has always provided. She heard her daughter sigh on the other end of the line. Michelle had inherited her mother's strength but not her faith. At 32, having clawed her way to a junior associate position at a law firm, Michelle believed in hard work and justice, not divine intervention. Faith doesn't pay rent, Mama. No, but it's gotten me this far. Grace paused, looking at the cardboard box. Michelle, can I ask you something? If you knew something that could save someone who had hurt you, would you help them? What do you mean? Grace chose her words carefully. Just a hypothetical. If you had information that could prevent someone from making a terrible mistake, someone who had treated you badly, would you still try to help them? Michelle was quiet for a moment. Mama, what did you find at that company? Just answer the question, baby. I don't know. Part of me says let them fail. Let them face the consequences of their actions. But another part, Michelle trailed off. I'd probably try to help. Because that's what you taught me. To do what's right, not what's easy. After they hung up, Grace finally opened the cardboard box. Beneath the photo frame and the plant, carefully folded, was a copy of everything she had discovered. Bank statements, transaction records, spreadsheets filled with her handwritten notes. She had kept copies, not because she planned to use them, but because 17 years of being careful had taught her to document everything. The numbers stared back at her, undeniable in their clarity. Someone at Thornhill Industries had been embezzling money for at least 2 years, possibly longer. They had created a sophisticated network of shell companies, fake vendors, and manipulated invoices. The person was brilliant, Grace had to admit. They understood the system well enough to exploit its weaknesses. But they hadn't counted on someone like Grace, someone who processed every invoice, who knew every vendor, who had spent 17 years understanding every corner of the company's finances. Someone whose uselessness had made her invisible, allowing her to see what others missed. The quarterly report Marcus was preparing to present showed a profit of $47 million. The real number, Grace calculated, was a loss of $23 million. When the truth came out, and it would come out, Thornhill Industries would face bankruptcy, scandal, and the destruction of thousands of jobs, including the jobs of people like Miguel, the security guard, like Sarah Chen, David's wife, who worked in HR, like dozens of other employees who had families, mortgages, dreams. Grace closed her eyes and prayed, really prayed, for the first time since leaving the office. Lord, show me what to do. I don't want revenge. I don't want to see him suffer. But I can't let innocent people lose everything because of one man's pride and another's greed. Please, show me the way. The answer didn't come immediately, as answers rarely do. But Grace had learned patience in a lifetime of waiting. Meanwhile, 15 miles away in Manhattan, Marcus Thornhill sat in his penthouse office, nursing a scotch and staring at the city lights below. The confrontation with Grace Williams kept replaying in his mind, and he hated that it bothered him. He had fired people before. Many people. It was part of business, part of maintaining standards. So why did this feel different? You're being ridiculous, he muttered to himself, finishing his drink. She was incompetent. You did what needed to be done. But another voice in his head, one that sounded uncomfortably like his father's, whispered back, Did you even look at what she was trying to show you? Marcus pushed the thought away. Tomorrow was the quarterly board meeting. Tomorrow, he would present numbers that would silence his critics, prove to the board that he was worthy of the empire his father had built. Tomorrow, He would show everyone that Marcus Thornhill Jr. was more than just a name and an inheritance. His phone buzzed. It was Victoria Walsh, the chief operating officer and the only person Marcus considered close to a friend. "Marcus, we need to talk about what happened today." "Not you too, Victoria. I don't need a lecture about corporate sensitivity." "This isn't about sensitivity. It's about optics. Grace Williams was well liked. People are talking. The story is already spreading through the company." "Let them talk. I run this company, not the gossip mill." Victoria was silent for a moment. "Your father would have listened to her." The words struck deep, deeper than Marcus wanted to admit. "My father is dead, Victoria, and his way of doing business died with him. This is my company now." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just playing dress-up in your father's office." Marcus ended the call, his hand shaking with anger. Everyone wanted to invoke his father's memory, to compare him to the great Theodore Thornhill, the self-made billionaire who had built an empire from nothing. But none of them understood the pressure of living in that shadow, of trying to prove yourself when everyone was waiting for you to fail. Theodore Thornhill had been a good man. Everyone said so. Fair, generous, visionary. But he had also been demanding, impossible to please, forever disappointed in his only son. Marcus had spent his entire life trying to earn his father's approval, and even now, 3 years after Theodore's death, he was still chasing that ghost. The next morning, Grace woke early, as she always did. The habit of 17 years of 6 a.m. starts didn't disappear overnight. She made her coffee, said her prayers, and sat down with the folder of documents once more. She had made her decision during the night, in that quiet space between sleep and waking when the soul speaks most clearly. She would try one more time, not for Marcus Thornhill, not even for herself, but for all the people whose lives would be destroyed if the company collapsed. For Miguel and his granddaughter's medical bills, for Sarah Chen and her elderly parents, for the hundreds of employees who had done nothing wrong except work for a company that was rotting from within. Grace picked up her phone and called the one person at Thornhill Industries she knew she could trust. David Chen. "Mr. Chen, this is Grace Williams. I need to speak with you. It's urgent." There was a long pause. Grace could almost hear him calculating the risks of being seen with her, of going against Marcus's decision. "Grace, I'm sorry about yesterday. What Marcus did was wrong, but I can't. Mr. Chen, Thornhill Industries is going to collapse within 6 months if someone doesn't act now. I have proof. I know you're afraid of losing your job, but if you don't listen to me, there won't be any jobs left to lose." Another pause, longer this time. Grace held her breath. "Where are you?" They met at a small diner in Queens, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan where corporate spies might recognize them. David Chen looked exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept. He ordered coffee he didn't drink and avoided Grace's eyes. "I should have stood up for you," he said finally. "I should have told Marcus he was wrong. I'm ashamed of my silence. I didn't ask you here for an apology, Mr. Chen. I asked you here because you're the only person who has the access and the authority to verify what I'm about to show you." Grace spread the documents across the table. For the next hour, she walked David through everything she had found. The shell companies, the fake vendors, the manipulated accounts, the systematic theft that had been happening right under everyone's noses. David's face grew paler with each page. His hands trembled as he checked the numbers on his phone, cross-referencing them with internal company data only he could access. "My God," he whispered. "How did we miss this?" "You missed it because you weren't looking. And the person doing this made sure to keep each transaction small enough to avoid triggering audits. Spread over 2 years, hidden in hundreds of legitimate transactions, it's nearly invisible. But you saw it." "I process every invoice, Mr. Chen. I see every number, and I remember." Grace tapped her temple. "My mama used to say I had a memory like a steel trap. When something doesn't fit the pattern, I notice." David looked at her with something like wonder. "Marcus called you useless. Marcus doesn't know what usefulness looks like. He's been taught to value the wrong things." Grace's voice held no bitterness, only sadness. The question is, Mr. Chen, what are you going to do with this information? David stared at the documents, his career, his reputation, his future, all hanging in the balance. If he brought this to Marcus, he would be admitting that Grace had been right all along. He would be proving that Marcus's judgment was catastrophically wrong, and Marcus was not a man who forgave being proven wrong. But if he did nothing, if he let Marcus present those false numbers to the board tomorrow, they would all be complicit in fraud. And when the truth eventually came out, as truth always does, David would lose everything anyway. I need to verify this independently, David said finally. I need to be absolutely certain before I go to Marcus. Of course. Grace had expected nothing less. But Mr. Chen, you need to move quickly. The board meeting is tomorrow. David gathered the documents, his hands still shaking. Grace, why are you doing this? After what he did to you, why are you trying to save his company? Grace thought about her daughter's question, about Michelle's confusion at her mother's forgiveness. She thought about all the years of discrimination, humiliation, and dismissal she had endured. She thought about how easy it would be to walk away, to let Marcus Thornhill's empire crumble, to call it justice. Because it's not about him, Mr. Chen. It's about doing what's right. And what's right is making sure innocent people don't suffer because of one man's pride and another's greed. She stood up, preparing to leave. Besides, I sleep better at night knowing I tried. My conscience is worth more than any revenge. As Grace walked out of the diner, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had done what she could. The rest was in God's hands and David Chen's courage. She didn't know that in less than 24 hours, her act of grace would trigger a revelation that would shake Thornhill Industries to its foundation, expose a betrayal that went deeper than anyone suspected, and force Marcus Thornhill to confront the truth about himself and the empire he thought he controlled. The game was changing, and the woman they had called useless was about to prove she was the most valuable player of all. David Chen didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office until 4 a.m., verifying every number, checking every transaction, following every trail that Grace Williams had laid out. His wife Sarah found him there at dawn, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, his eyes red from exhaustion and shock. David, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, he whispered. I've seen the truth. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 8 a.m., David walked into Marcus Thornhill's office without knocking, something he had never done in 5 years as CFO. Marcus looked up from his computer, irritation flashing across his face. David, I'm preparing for the board meeting. Whatever this is, it can wait. No, Marcus, it can't. David closed the door and placed a thick folder on the desk. You need to cancel the board meeting. Marcus laughed, a dismissive sound that made David's jaw tighten. Cancel? Are you insane? Do you know how many board members flew in for this meeting? Do you know what canceling would do to investor confidence? Do you know what presenting fraudulent numbers would do? David's voice was quiet, but it cut through Marcus's bluster like a knife. Because that's what you're about to do. Present fraudulent numbers that will destroy this company. The color drained from Marcus's face. What are you talking about? Grace Williams was right. She tried to tell you, but you were too busy humiliating her to listen. David opened the folder, spreading documents across the expensive mahogany desk. Someone has been systematically embezzling from this company for at least 2 years. The quarterly report you're about to present shows a profit of $47 million. The real number is a loss of $23 million. Marcus stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. That's impossible. Our auditors didn't catch it because the person doing this is brilliant. They created shell companies, fake vendors, manipulated invoices in ways that looked completely legitimate. Small transactions spread across hundreds of accounts. It's sophisticated, calculated, and it's been bleeding us dry. David's voice grew harder. Grace Williams caught it because she actually pays attention, because she knows every vendor, processes every invoice, sees patterns that the rest of us miss. Grace Williams, Marcus repeated slowly, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. The woman I fired. The woman you called useless in front of 60 employees. Yes, that Grace Williams. Marcus sank into his chair, his usual confidence crumbling. How did you verify this? I spent all night checking her work, every number, every transaction, every claim. Marcus, she's not wrong. She's exactly right. And if we present those numbers to the board today, we're committing fraud. When the truth comes out, and it will come out, we'll face criminal charges. The company will collapse. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. Who? Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Who's been stealing from us? David's face hardened. That's the worst part. It's someone with high-level access. Someone who understands our systems inside and out. Someone we trust. Give me a name, David. I can't. Not yet. But I have my suspicions, and I need more time to prove it. David leaned forward, his voice urgent. Marcus, you need to postpone the board meeting. Tell them we discovered an accounting discrepancy that needs to be resolved. It'll look bad, but not as bad as presenting false numbers. Marcus's mind was racing. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Integrity, son. In business, your integrity is all you really have. Lose that and you've lost everything. What does Grace want? Marcus asked suddenly. Why did she tell you this? What's her price? David stared at him, something like disgust crossing his face. Her price? Marcus, she doesn't want anything. She came to me because she didn't want innocent people to lose their jobs. She could have walked away. She could have let this company burn after the way you treated her. But she didn't. Because unlike some people, Grace Williams understands what integrity actually means. The words struck Marcus like physical blows. He thought about the moment he had thrown her folder across the room, about calling her useless, about the look of quiet dignity on her face as she forgave him. He had interpreted that forgiveness as weakness. Now he understood it was strength. I need to see her, Marcus said suddenly, standing up. I need to talk to Grace Williams. Why? So you can humiliate her again? So you can question her motives? No. Marcus's voice was raw. So I can apologize, and so I can ask for her help. David studied his boss for a long moment. She doesn't owe you anything, Marcus. You understand that, right? She doesn't owe you her time, her expertise, or her forgiveness. She already gave you more than you deserved by bringing this to my attention. I know. Marcus grabbed his coat. But I have to try. An hour later, Marcus Thornhill stood in front of a weathered apartment building in the Bronx, feeling more out of place than he ever had in his life. His Mercedes looked obscene parked on the street, a symbol of wealth in a neighborhood where people counted pennies. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 4C. Yes? Grace's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Williams, it's Marcus Thornhill. I need to speak with you, please. There was a long silence. Marcus held his breath, waiting for her to tell him to leave, to curse him, to slam the connection closed. He would have deserved all of it. 4th floor. The elevator's broken. Marcus climbed the stairs, each step feeling like a small penance. The stairwell smelled of cooking, spices he didn't recognize, life being lived in close quarters. It was so far from his penthouse, his world of glass and steel and perfectly controlled temperatures. Grace was waiting at her door. She looked smaller somehow in her own space, wearing simple jeans and a cardigan instead of her work clothes. But her eyes were steady, and her spine was straight. Mr. Thornhill. She didn't invite him in. Ms. Williams, Grace, Marcus found himself struggling for words, something that never happened to him. I owe you an apology. What I said to you, what I did, was unforgivable. You were trying to help, and I was cruel. Yes, you were. Grace's voice was calm, matter of fact. But I already forgave you, Mr. Thornhill. I told you that. I don't understand why. After everything I said, because holding on to anger would only hurt me, not you. Because I've learned that people who lash out are usually in pain themselves, even if they don't know it. And because my faith teaches me that forgiveness isn't optional, it's necessary. Marcus felt something break inside him, something that had been holding back emotions he didn't know he had. David told me what you discovered. He told me you spent weeks verifying it, that you tried to warn me, that you could have walked away and let the company fail. I could have. But that wouldn't have been right. Why do you care? Why do you care about a company that just fired you, about a man who humiliated you? Grace smiled sadly. I don't care about the company, Mr. Thornhill. I care about the people. Miguel, the security guard who helped me carry groceries to my car when I worked late. Sarah Chen, who helped me with computer systems when I was learning the new software. Dozens of other employees who have families, dreams, lives that matter. I couldn't let them suffer because of your pride or someone else's greed. I don't deserve your help. No, you don't. But that's not how grace works, Mr. Thornhill. We don't help people because they deserve it. We help them because it's the right thing to do. Marcus felt tears, actual tears, burning his eyes. When was the last time he had cried? At his father's funeral. Before that? I need your help, Grace. I need you to come back to the company. I need you to help us find whoever is doing this before they destroy everything. You fired me, remember? Called me useless in front of everyone. I was wrong. Catastrophically, humiliatingly wrong. And I will say that to everyone in the company. I will apologize publicly. I will. Grace held up her hand, stopping him. Mr. Thornhill, I don't need your public apology. I don't need you to grovel. What I need is for you to understand something. What? That people's value isn't determined by their education or their background or the color of their skin. That the janitor who cleans your office might have wisdom you lack. That the waitress serving your lunch might have dreams bigger than you can imagine. That everyone, every single person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. I understand that now. I do. Grace studied him for a long moment, her eyes seeing deeper than Marcus was comfortable with. Maybe you're starting to, but understanding and living it are two different things. Will you help us? Please? Grace was quiet, weighing the decision. Her daughter Michelle had called that morning, urging her to demand her job back with a raise, to make Marcus Thornhill pay for what he had done. But Grace knew that kind of victory would be hollow. I'll help, she said finally, but not as your employee, as a consultant. And not because you asked, but because those people, Miguel, Sarah, all of them, they deserve someone fighting for them. Name your terms, whatever you want. My terms are simple, Mr. Thornhill. You will treat every employee in that company, from the CEO to the night janitor, with respect. You will listen when people try to help you, regardless of their title or background. And you will learn to see people for who they are, not what you think they should be. Marcus nodded, humbled in a way he had never experienced. I agree. All of it. Then let's get to work. Because whoever is stealing from your company is smart, and they're not going to stop until they're caught, or until there's nothing left to steal. As they drove back to Manhattan together, Grace in the passenger seat of Marcus's Mercedes, an incongruity neither of them commented on, Marcus felt as if he was seeing the city for the first time. The neighborhoods they passed, the people on the streets, the lives being lived outside his bubble of privilege. My father grew up poor, Marcus said suddenly. Did you know that? Dirt poor, in a mining town in West Virginia. He used to tell me stories about it, about how hard his mother worked, about neighbors helping each other survive. He built this company from nothing, and he never forgot where he came from. But you did, Grace said gently. You forgot because you never experienced it yourself. You inherited the success without the struggle. He was disappointed in me, my father. He never said it, but I always knew. I wasn't tough enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't enough. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I was worthy of his legacy, and instead, I've nearly destroyed it. Mr. Thornhill, can I tell you something? Please, and call me Marcus. Marcus, then. Your father's legacy isn't the company. It's not the money or the buildings or the stock price. His legacy is the choices he made, the people he helped, the lives he touched. You can't inherit that. You have to build it yourself. They arrived at Thornhill Tower to find chaos. News of the postponed board meeting had leaked and reporters were gathering outside. Stock prices were already falling. Rumors were spreading like wildfire. David Chen met them in the lobby, his face tight with stress. The board is furious. Victoria's trying to manage them, but they're demanding explanations. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. What? David glanced at Grace, then back to Marcus. I know who's been embezzling. I verified it an hour ago. Marcus, it's Victoria. The name hung in the air like a bomb. Victoria Walsh, Marcus's COO, his most trusted executive, the woman he had considered his only friend in the company. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. That's impossible. Victoria would never. She's been doing it for 3 years, not 2. She created an entire network of shell companies, some registered in her maiden name, some through family members. She's stolen over $80 million, Marcus, and she's been planning to disappear. Her passport shows a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands booked for next week. Grace watched Marcus's face, saw the betrayal written there, the shock of learning that the person closest to him was the one destroying everything. She felt compassion for him, this man who had been so cruel to her, who was now facing the consequences of his blindness. Where is she? Marcus's voice was hollow. In her office. She doesn't know we know. But Marcus, we need to handle this carefully. If she suspects... No. Marcus's voice was suddenly strong, certain. No more hiding. No more pretending. Grace, will you come with me? I need someone who knows what integrity looks like. Grace nodded, understanding that this moment was about more than catching a thief. It was about Marcus Thornhill finally becoming the man his father had hoped he would be. As they walked toward the elevator, toward the confrontation that would change everything, Grace sent up a silent prayer. Not for herself, but for Marcus, for Victoria, for all the broken people trying to find their way in a world that often rewarded the wrong things. The revelation was coming, and with it, the chance for true transformation. Victoria Walsh's office was immaculate as always. Modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, everything arranged with the precision of someone who controlled every detail of their life. She looked up as Marcus entered, Grace following behind him, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, then calculation, then a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus. And Grace Williams, isn't it? I heard you were fired. What brings you back? Marcus closed the door quietly. His hands were steady, but Grace could see the pain in his eyes. Victoria, I need you to be honest with me. For once. Just be honest. Victoria's smile faded. I don't know what you mean. The shell companies, the fake vendors, the $80 million you've stolen over 3 years. Marcus's voice was controlled, but barely. I know everything, Victoria. David verified it. Grace discovered it. It's over. For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. Then something shifted in her expression, and the mask she had been wearing for years finally fell away. What remained was cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. You know what the problem with you is, Marcus? Victoria stood up, moving to the window. You're so busy trying to be your father that you never learn to see what's right in front of you. I've been stealing from this company for 3 years and you never noticed. Not once. Why? The question came out as a whisper. I trusted you. I considered you my friend. Victoria laughed, a harsh sound. Friend? Marcus, I was never your friend. I was your employee, your subordinate. The woman who smiled and nodded while you made terrible decisions, who cleaned up your messes, who did the real work while you played at being CEO. So you decided to steal from the company? To destroy everything my father built? Your father. Victoria's voice dripped with contempt. Do you know what your father paid me, Marcus? After 15 years of loyalty, after helping him build this empire, he left me with a salary that was a fraction of what the male executives made. And you? You inherited everything. The company, the money, the respect. You got it all because you were born with the right last name, while people like me had to fight for every scrap. Grace spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. So you decided that justified stealing? That justified destroying the lives of thousands of employees who had nothing to do with your grievances? Victoria turned to Grace, her eyes cold. Don't lecture me about justice. You of all people should understand. You worked here for 17 years and what did you get? Minimum wage and humiliation. At least I had the courage to take what I deserved. That's not courage, Grace said softly. That's just greed dressed up as righteousness. And the people you hurt weren't the people who wronged you. They were innocent employees, families, people whose only crime was working for this company. Spare me the moral superiority. You're here to help Marcus save his empire, aren't you? The same Marcus who called you useless and fired you in front of everyone. At least I'm honest about what I am. You're right about one thing, Grace said. You are honest about what you are. You're someone who chose bitterness over grace, revenge over integrity. And yes, Marcus wronged me. Deeply. But that doesn't give me the right to hurt innocent people. That doesn't make me judge, jury, and executioner. Marcus had been silent, listening to the exchange. Now he spoke, his voice heavy with grief. Victoria, I failed you. My father failed you. You deserved better compensation, better recognition, better treatment. But this wasn't the answer. What was the answer then, Marcus? To keep smiling and accepting less? To keep watching mediocre men get promoted while I did their work? To keep being grateful for the scraps from your table? Victoria's composure was cracking now, years of resentment pouring out. I gave everything to this company, everything, and I was invisible, just like Grace was invisible to you. The difference is I decided to make myself seen. By stealing, by fraud, by planning to abandon everyone when the company collapsed. Marcus shook his head. That's not being seen, Victoria. That's just running away. Victoria moved toward her desk, and Grace saw her hand moving toward the drawer. David, get security up here now, Grace said urgently into her phone, having anticipated this moment. Victoria froze, realizing she was trapped. The one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands was worthless now. The carefully constructed escape plan was in ruins. Years of plotting, of covering tracks, of maintaining the perfect facade, all undone by an accountant she had never even noticed. How? Victoria asked, looking at Grace with something like unwilling respect. How did you catch me? I was so careful. You were, Grace admitted, but you made one mistake. You thought that because people didn't see you, they weren't paying attention. The invoices were brilliant, the shell companies were sophisticated, the timing was perfect. But I knew every vendor we used, every legitimate transaction, and over time I noticed patterns that didn't fit. The cleaning supplies invoices, Victoria said suddenly, understanding dawning. That's what gave me away, wasn't it? Grace nodded. You created a fake vendor called Empire Maintenance Solutions. The invoices looked legitimate, but the amounts were slightly higher than market rate. Most people wouldn't notice. But I talked to the actual cleaning staff. I knew what supplies cost, how much we used. The numbers were off by just a few percentage points, but over time those percentages added up. And you caught it because you used to be a janitor. Victoria's laugh was bitter. The great irony. I was brought down by the one person in this company I never thought twice about. That's the problem with people like you, Grace said gently. You only see the people you think matter. You miss everyone else. And you miss the truth that everyone matters. Everyone has value. Everyone sees things you don't. Security arrived, along with David Chen and 2 lawyers. Victoria Walsh was placed under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and grand larceny. As they led her away, she looked back at Marcus one last time. I hope you learned something from this, Marcus. I hope you realize that the people you dismiss, the people you overlook, they're the ones who can either save you or destroy you. Grace Williams saved you. I tried to destroy you. Remember that the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their title or their background. After Victoria was gone, Marcus sank into her chair, looking older than his 42 years. She was right about one thing. I was blind, to her, to you, to so many people. Grace sat down across from him. The question is, Marcus, what are you going to do now? Are you going to learn from this, or are you going to go back to the way things were? I don't even know who I am anymore, Marcus admitted. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about myself, about this company, it's all built on sand. No, Grace said firmly. It's built on a foundation your father created. A foundation of hard work, integrity, and caring about people. You just forgot to maintain it. But foundations can be repaired, Marcus, if you're willing to do the work. Over the next week, Thornhill Industries transformed. Marcus held an emergency board meeting where he explained everything, the embezzlement, the near collapse, and how Grace Williams had saved the company. He publicly apologized for firing her, for his treatment of her, for his failure as a leader. The board was shocked, then angry, then gradually understanding as they realized how close they had come to disaster. Marcus announced immediate changes, comprehensive audits of all accounts, new oversight procedures, and a commitment to treating every employee with dignity and respect. But the most significant change came in a company-wide meeting. Marcus stood before 600 employees, his voice steady but humble. I want to tell you about a woman named Grace Williams. Most of you probably didn't know her name before last week. She worked in accounting for 17 years. She started as a night janitor and worked her way up through determination and night school. And I fired her. I fired her because she tried to warn me about a problem I was too arrogant to see. The room was silent. Grace, sitting in the back, tried to remain inconspicuous, but people were turning to look at her. Grace Williams discovered that our chief operating officer was systematically stealing from this company. She spent weeks verifying her findings, and when she tried to bring it to my attention, I called her useless. I humiliated her in front of her colleagues. I threw her work across the room without looking at it. And then I fired her. Marcus paused, his voice thick with emotion. After I did all of that, Grace Williams could have walked away. She could have let this company collapse, and no one would have blamed her. Instead, she came back. Not for me, but for you. For Miguel in security, for Sarah in HR, for every single employee who would have lost their livelihood if this company had failed. He looked directly at Grace. Ms. Williams, would you please join me up here? Grace hesitated, then walked slowly to the front of the room. Marcus turned to face her, and in front of 600 witnesses, he did something that billionaire CEOs rarely do. He apologized. Grace, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for the way I treated you. You deserved respect and I gave you contempt. You deserved to be heard and I silenced you. You deserved appreciation, and I gave you humiliation. I was wrong. Not just wrong in my judgment, but wrong in my character. You showed me what real strength looks like, what real integrity means. And you saved this company not because you wanted anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. Tears were flowing freely down Grace's cheeks now, but she was smiling. I forgive you, Marcus, I already did, but I'm glad you understand why forgiveness was necessary. Marcus turned back to the employees. Effective immediately, I'm announcing several changes. First, we will be conducting a comprehensive review of compensation across all levels of this company. No one who does equal work will receive unequal pay based on gender, race, or background. Second, we're establishing an employee advisory council with representatives from every department, including maintenance, security, and administration. Their voices will be heard in every major decision. He paused, looking at Grace. And third, I'm creating a new position, Vice President of Ethical Operations. This person will have the authority to review any decision, question any practice, and ensure that this company never again loses sight of the values my father built it on. Grace Williams, if you'll accept, I'd like to offer you that position. The room erupted in applause. Grace stood there, overwhelmed, thinking about her 17-year journey from night janitor to this moment. She thought about all the people who had dismissed her, overlooked her, underestimated her. And she thought about the power of choosing grace over bitterness, forgiveness over revenge. I accept, she said quietly. On one condition. Name it. That you mean what you said. That this isn't just words to make the company look good. that you're truly committed to seeing every person in this organization as valuable, worthy of respect, regardless of their position or background. Marcus extended his hand. You have my word. And Grace, if I ever forget, I'm counting on you to remind me. As they shook hands, Grace felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. This wasn't just about one woman getting justice. It was about changing a system, about proving that dignity and integrity could triumph over prejudice and pride. That evening, Grace called her daughter, Michelle. Mama, I saw the news. Vice President? Mama, I'm so proud of you. Grace smiled, looking out at the city lights from her new office. An office with windows, with space, with a view that reminded her how far she had come. It's not about the title, baby. It's about what the title represents. Change. Real change. You changed him, Mama. You changed Marcus Thornhill. No, sweetheart. I just showed him the truth. He chose to change himself. That's the only kind of change that lasts. After they hung up, Grace sat in the quiet office and prayed, as she always did. But this time, her prayers were different. Not prayers of desperation or survival, but prayers of gratitude and hope. She thought about the young woman who had arrived in this country 30 years ago with nothing but faith and determination. She thought about the years of struggle, the discrimination, the closed doors and bitter disappointments. She thought about the moment Marcus Thornhill had called her useless, and how that moment had become the catalyst for transformation. God works in mysterious ways, Grace thought. Even our deepest pain can become our greatest purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing a corporate culture, breaking down decades of prejudice and blind spots, ensuring that the reforms Marcus promised actually happened, all of that would require vigilance, courage, and persistence. But Grace Williams had never shied away from hard work. And now, for the first time in her professional life, she had the authority and the platform to make real, lasting change. The woman they had called useless was about to prove that she was invaluable. And in doing so, she would help build a company that honored the best of Theodore Thornhill's vision while creating something even better. A place where every person, regardless of background, could rise as far as their talent and character would take them. The transformation was underway, and Grace Williams was just getting started. 2 years later, Grace Williams stood in the lobby of the newly renamed Thornhill Williams Community Center, watching as children from the surrounding neighborhoods poured through the doors for after-school programs. The building, once a shuttered warehouse, now gleamed with fresh paint and possibility. Ms. Grace! A young girl ran up to her, homework clutched in her small hands. Can you help me with my math? Grace knelt down, her smile warm. Of course, sweetheart. That's what I'm here for. This was the part of her new life that Grace loved most. Yes, being vice president of ethical operations at Thornhill Industries gave her the power to change corporate policies, to ensure fair treatment, to hold people accountable. But this community center funded by the company, serving the neighborhood where she had lived for 30 years, this was where real transformation happened. Marcus Thornhill appeared at the entrance, no longer looking uncomfortable in casual clothes. Over 2 years, he had become a regular volunteer at the center, tutoring kids in business skills, listening to their dreams, learning their names. The man who had once lived in a bubble of privilege now knew the stories of real people, real struggles. Grace, the board meeting is in an hour, he reminded her gently. The vote on the expanded scholarship program. Grace nodded, finishing with the young girl's homework before standing. I'll be there, but Marcus, you know you don't have to pick me up every time. I'm perfectly capable of... I know you are, Marcus interrupted with a smile. But I like the drive. It reminds me of what matters, who I'm working for. In the car, they reviewed the proposal Grace had developed. A comprehensive scholarship program for the children of Thornhill Industries employees, with special provisions for those from underprivileged backgrounds. It would cost the company millions, but Grace had demonstrated with meticulous financial analysis how investing in employees' families created loyalty, reduced turnover, and ultimately strengthened the bottom line. You know, my father would have loved this program, Marcus said as they drove through Manhattan. He always said that a company's greatest asset wasn't its products or its profits, but its people. I spent years not understanding what he meant. I thought people were just resources to be managed, problems to be solved. And now? Grace asked. Now I understand that every person who works for us has a story, a family, dreams that matter just as much as mine. That receptionist we just passed? Her name is Maria. She's putting herself through law school at night. The security guard in the lobby? James. His daughter just got accepted to medical school. I know these things now because I learned to see people, really see them. You taught me that. Grace smiled. I didn't teach you, Marcus. I just reminded you of what your father already knew. You chose to learn. The board meeting was tense. Not everyone supported Grace's scholarship program. Some board members still saw it as unnecessary spending, corporate charity that benefited the employees more than the shareholders. Charles Morrison, a board member who had been resistant to many of Grace's initiatives, spoke first. Ms. Williams, I respect what you've accomplished here. The ethical oversight has been valuable. But this scholarship program, it's $15 million annually. That's money that could go to shareholders, to expansion, to what, Mr. Morrison? Grace interrupted gently. To short-term profits that ignore long-term sustainability? To shareholder dividends that come at the expense of the people who actually create the value in this company? She stood, distributing packets she had prepared. Let me show you something. Since implementing our ethical operations program 2 years ago, employee retention has increased by 37%. Productivity is up 28%. Customer satisfaction has reached record highs. And our stock price? It's increased by 45%, outperforming every competitor in our sector. The board members studied the data, impressed despite themselves. These aren't just numbers, Grace continued, her voice steady and passionate. These represent real people who feel valued, who work harder because they're treated with dignity, who stay with the company because they believe in what we're building. The scholarship program isn't charity. It's an investment in the very people who make this company successful. Another board member, Eleanor Vasquez, spoke up. Grace, I've been on this board for 15 years. I've seen a lot of initiatives come and go. But what you've built here, it's different. My granddaughter applied for an internship last month, and do you know what she said? She said Thornhill Industries is the kind of company she wants to work for because it treats people right. That's worth more than any quarterly earnings report. The vote was called. Grace held her breath as hands were raised. When the final count came in, the scholarship program passed with 9 votes in favor, 3 against. Grace felt tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. After the meeting, Marcus found her in her office looking out at the city below. You did it, Grace. Another victory. Not mine, Marcus. Ours. And more importantly, theirs. All those families who will have opportunities they never thought possible. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Grace, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone. Of course. The night before I fired you, I had a dream about my father. He was disappointed in me like always, but this time he said something I'll never forget. He said, Marcus, power without purpose is just noise. Status without service is just emptiness. When you learn to measure success by the people you lift up instead of the people you climb over, then you'll understand what it means to be a leader. Marcus's voice broke slightly. When I woke up, I was angry. Angry at him for still judging me, even in death. Angry at myself for caring. And when you tried to show me those reports the next day, all of that anger came out. I saw you as a reminder of everything I wasn't. Humble, patient, genuinely concerned about others. So I destroyed you to make myself feel powerful. But you didn't destroy me, Marcus, Grace said softly. You hurt me, yes. But you didn't destroy me. Because my worth isn't determined by what other people say about me. It's determined by who I choose to be in response to how they treat me. How did you learn that? How did you learn to forgive so completely? Grace thought about her journey. From a young immigrant cleaning floors to a single mother working 3 jobs, to a woman dismissed and humiliated despite her competence. She thought about all the times she could have become bitter, angry, hardened by the world's injustice. "I learned it from my grandmother," she said finally. "She was a woman who survived things I can't even imagine. Poverty, discrimination, loss. But she used to tell me, 'Grace, baby, the world will give you plenty of reasons to become hard. Don't let it. Stay soft where it matters, in your heart, because hard hearts break, but soft hearts bend and grow stronger.'" Marcus nodded slowly, understanding. "I'm trying to stay soft, Grace. It's harder than I thought. Every day I'm tempted to fall back into old patterns, making decisions based on status, judging people by their backgrounds, valuing profit over people. But then I remember what almost happened, how close I came to destroying everything because of my arrogance." "The fact that you're aware of those temptations means you're growing," Grace assured him. "Change isn't a destination, Marcus. It's a daily choice. Every morning, you choose who you want to be." 6 months later, Thornhill Industries held its annual company dinner, but it was unlike any corporate event they had ever hosted. Instead of a luxury hotel, the event was held at the community center. Instead of excluding lower-level employees, everyone was invited, from the CEO to the custodial staff. Grace stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd. She saw Miguel, the security guard, sitting with his family. Sarah Chen, now Director of Human Resources, was there with her elderly parents. Dozens of employees who had once been invisible were now celebrated, honored, seen. 3 years ago, Grace began, her voice clear and strong, "I was fired from this company. The CEO called me useless in front of my colleagues. He threw my work across the room without looking at it, and in that moment I had a choice. I could become bitter, or I could become better." She paused, letting the words settle. "I chose to become better, not because I'm special or particularly virtuous, but because I believe that how we respond to injustice defines us more than the injustice itself. And what I learned is that grace, the choice to forgive, to help, to see the humanity in people even when they can't see it in you, that grace has the power to transform everything." Marcus joined her at the podium. "Grace Williams saved this company. Not just financially, though she did that too. She saved it morally. She reminded us that business isn't just about profit margins and shareholder value. It's about people. It's about creating opportunities, treating everyone with dignity, building something that matters beyond the bottom line." He pulled out an envelope. "Grace, I know you don't like public recognition. You've told me many times that you don't do this work for awards or acknowledgement, but I need everyone here to know what you've accomplished. In 3 years, you've transformed this company. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We've implemented fair pay practices that have eliminated gender and racial wage gaps. We've created pathways for advancement that are based on merit, not connections. And we've established programs that support our employees and their families in ways we never imagined." Marcus opened the envelope. "The board has voted to establish the Grace Williams Foundation for Workplace Dignity, funded with $50 million from the company. This foundation will help other corporations develop ethical practices, support workers facing discrimination, and create opportunities for people who have been overlooked and underestimated." The room erupted in applause. Grace stood there, overwhelmed, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From cleaning floors to standing before hundreds of people as a symbol of hope and transformation. But what moved her most wasn't the foundation or the recognition. It was seeing Miguel's granddaughter wearing a Thornhill Industries Scholarship Program t-shirt, looking at Grace with eyes full of possibility. It was seeing young employees, diverse in background and experience, knowing they worked for a company that valued them. It was knowing that the changes she had fought for would outlast her, would create opportunities for people she would never meet. After the dinner, Grace found Marcus standing alone, looking at a wall where they had hung photos of employees and their families, hundreds of faces representing the real heart of the company. "Do you ever think about that day?" Grace asked quietly. "The day you fired me?" Marcus nodded. "Every day. It's my reminder of who I never want to be again." "Good. Don't forget, but also don't let it define you. You're not the same man who threw that folder across the room. You've grown. You've changed. You've become the leader your father hoped you would be. Only because you showed me how. Marcus turned to face her. Grace, I know I can never fully repay what you did. How you saved the company, how you forgave me, how you've helped me become a better person. But I want you to know that you've changed my life. Completely and forever. You changed your own life, Marcus. I just held up a mirror. They stood together looking at the photos, at the faces of real people whose lives were better because one woman chose grace over bitterness, forgiveness over revenge, hope over despair. 5 years after that transformational day when Grace Williams was called useless and fired, she stood in her living room now filled with family for Thanksgiving dinner. Her daughter Michelle was there with her husband and children, former colleagues who had become friends. And surprisingly, Marcus Thornhill, who had become like family over the years of working together. Grace's grandson, now 10 years old, asked her a question. Grandma, why do you have all those awards in your office? What did you do? Grace smiled, thinking about how to answer. I learned that the most powerful thing in the world isn't money or status or position. It's choosing to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. It's treating people with dignity, even when they don't treat you that way. It's believing that every person has value and living your life to prove it. But what did you actually do? The boy persisted, with the beautiful literalism of children. Marcus spoke up, his voice warm with affection and respect. Your grandmother saved a lot of people. She saved a company. But most importantly, she saved me. She showed me that being powerful doesn't mean making others feel small. It means lifting them up, and that lesson changed everything. Later that evening, as Grace cleaned up after dinner, Michelle joined her in the kitchen. Mama, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a partnership at my firm, but there's a catch. They want me to represent a company that's being sued for discrimination. The case is solid. The company is clearly in the wrong, but they're offering an enormous amount of money to defend them. Grace dried her hands, turning to face her daughter. What do you want to do? The money would be life-changing, Mama. I could pay off my student loans, buy a real house, secure my children's future, but I'd have to argue against everything you taught me. I'd have to defend practices I know are wrong. Grace took her daughter's hands. Michelle, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. Money you earn by betraying your principles will never bring you peace. And the future you build on compromised values won't be the legacy you want to leave your children. Michelle's eyes filled with tears. You turned down opportunities because of your principles. You were fired because you stood up for what was right. And look at what happened. Everything worked out. Not everything worked out because I was principled, baby. Some things worked out because of grace, timing, and the choices other people made. But what I can tell you is this. I sleep well at night. I look at myself in the mirror and like what I see, and no amount of money is worth losing that. Michelle hugged her mother tightly. I'm going to decline the partnership in the case, and I'm going to start my own firm, focusing on employment discrimination cases, helping people like you who get overlooked and mistreated but deserve dignity. Grace felt tears of pride and joy. That's my girl. That's my strong, beautiful, principled girl. On the 10th anniversary of the day Grace Williams had been fired and then saved Thornhill Industries, the company held a special ceremony. The Thornhill Williams Community Center had expanded to serve 5 neighborhoods. The scholarship program had sent 200 children to college. The Grace Williams Foundation had helped 50 companies implement ethical workplace practices. But the most significant change couldn't be measured in numbers. It was in the culture, the atmosphere, the way people treated each other. It was in the faces of employees who felt valued, in the opportunities given to people who had previously been overlooked, in the simple but profound shift from seeing workers as resources to seeing them as human beings with dignity and worth. Grace stood before the assembled company one last time before her retirement. At 68 years old, she had accomplished more than she had ever dreamed possible. When I was a young woman cleaning floors in this building, she began, her voice still strong, I used to wonder if anyone saw me. If anyone knew my name, my dreams, my value. And the truth is, most people didn't. I was invisible, just another face in the background of other people's important lives. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But I learned something important. Your value doesn't depend on whether others see it. Your worth isn't determined by your title, your salary, or your position in the hierarchy. Every single person has inherent dignity that can't be taken away, only ignored. And when we choose to see that dignity in each other, when we choose to honor it, respect it, and celebrate it, that's when transformation happens. Grace's voice grew softer but more intense. I forgave Marcus Thornhill for calling me useless, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved freedom from bitterness. I came back to save this company, not because Marcus deserved saving, but because hundreds of innocent people deserved protection. And I've spent these years fighting for workplace dignity, not because I needed vindication, but because every person deserves to be treated with respect. She looked directly at the younger employees, the next generation. Some of you will face discrimination. Some of you will be overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. And in those moments, you'll have a choice. You can become bitter, or you can become better. You can seek revenge, or you can seek restoration. You can demand recognition, or you can simply do what's right because it's right. Grace smiled, that same warm smile that had carried her through decades of challenges. Choose grace. Choose forgiveness. Choose integrity. Not because it's easy. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But because it's the only path that leads to real, lasting change. And because the world desperately needs people who choose to be light in the darkness, hope in despair, and dignity in the face of injustice. As Grace Williams walked out of Thornhill Industries for the last time, this time in triumph rather than disgrace, she carried with her the knowledge that her life had mattered. Not because of the title she had earned or the recognition she had received, but because she had stayed true to herself, to her values, to her faith. She had proven that one person, armed with integrity and courage, could change everything. That grace was more powerful than bitterness, that forgiveness was stronger than revenge, and that the people society dismisses as useless are often the very ones who carry the wisdom, the strength, and the vision to transform the world. The story of Grace Williams would be told for years to come at Thornhill Industries. It would inspire new employees, guide difficult decisions, and remind everyone that the measure of a company, like the measure of a person, isn't found in quarterly reports or stock prices, but in how it treats the most vulnerable, honors the most overlooked, and values every human being. And somewhere in heaven, Grace liked to imagine, Theodore Thornhill was smiling, knowing that his company had finally become what he always dreamed it could be. Not just successful, but good. Not just profitable, but purposeful. Not just powerful, but principled. Grace Williams had saved more than a company from bankruptcy. She had saved the souls of everyone who worked there, proving that one act of grace multiplied by courage and sustained by faith could transform not just individual lives, but entire institutions. And that was a legacy worth more than all the money in the world. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to never miss stories of courage and justice, like if you believe dignity matters. Share to inspire someone who needs hope today. Your voice counts.